Hello, dear fellow panelists and dear participants, and welcome to our first Insight Sustainability webinar for the 2024 in the DRBF Region 2. Our topic today is dispute avoidance and resolution in energy transition projects. I am Georgiana Tekuc, President-elect of the DRBF Board of Directors Region 2, and I'm your host for today. For those new to DRBF, the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation was established in the 1996 by the creators of the dispute board process with a mission to develop dispute avoidance and effective resolution for construction projects. Today, the association has over 1,400 members in over 70 countries, and the dispute board process has expanded worldwide and is now used on a variety of projects and long-term contracts of many types and sizes. The DRBF develops best practices and offers training and educational resources for project owners, contractors, and dispute board practitioners. And it also partners with other industry organizations to adapt the dispute board process to new sectors. It may be of interest to you to know that DRBF is publishing a guide to best practices and procedures, the DB manual, which is now available not only in English, but also in French, Spanish, and Portuguese. You could download it from the DRBF website. Today, we will look at what energy transition is and why it is important for all of us, but also to energy transition disputes and what they may be about and how to tackle them. We will try to look to the positive aspects, but also to the possible dark side, the so-called bottlenecks. And in order to do that, we have invited today Michael Carver from UK and Trung Nguyen Nam from Vietnam to be our guides. We are booked for an hour, but we could stay a bit longer if you have very many questions. And for those of you who cannot stay past the hour, do not worry. The recording will be available on the DRBF YouTube channel and also in the DRBF library. And now, please allow me to introduce to you Michael Carver. Michael is a lawyer by background and has over 30 years of experience in dispute resolution. He is a full-time independent third-party neutral and a member of RBDB chambers. He accepts appointments as arbitrator, mediator, and adjudicator, and is on the panels of many of the leading dispute resolution institutions around the world. Michael has undertaken DAAB training with the DRBF and DBF, and has also worked with the DAABs in Eastern Europe in the preparation and delivery of claims, as well as on the management of major projects. Trung Nguyen Nam is having more than 20 years of experience in construction and power industries. He's a FedEx certified trainer on fundamental contracts in Silverbrook. He has experience in construction arbitration cases with Vietnam International Arbitration Center, and has also been listed by other panels of arbitrators like IAC, Thailand, and others. He has been trained on dispute boards in courses organized and certified both by FedEx Academy and DRBF, and also has experience as a chair of a dispute adjudication board for power projects. And now I would like to invite Michael to tell us, what is this energy transition about? Michael, if you please.
Okay, thank you, Georgiana, and welcome to everybody. As Georgiana's already put up, please take advantage of the chat facility, folks, in the sidebar, and we'll try our best, marshaled by Georgiana, to ask your questions, points, and even statements. So Georgiana has very well, I think, set out what the DRBF does, and I guess most of us will be familiar with what are generally now known as DAABs, Dispute Avoidance and Adjudication Boards. But obviously, they're generally standing independent boards, 1 to 3 people on the board who are neutral independent and impartial, and who work with project teams on major projects, particularly used by the World Bank and the other multilateral development banks on major projects around the world. And as Georgiana has said, one of the missions of the DRBF is to drive these boards forward to even greater use, and in particular into sectors other than construction, which I find particularly important. So what is energy transition? Well, it's really the transforming of our global energy systems to achieve a sustainable balance within the world, whilst also meet the needs of growing economies, whilst we're all striving to net zero emissions. And this has come out of things like COP28, the Paris Agreement to move to net zero by 2050, the whole idea being to limit temperature rises to 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius. I think that's compared with 1995 or something like that. Anyway, somewhere in there. I must say, I find this quite interesting. I'm sitting sort of between the Midlands and the north of England, and there's not much sign of global warming here at the moment. In fact, I was the night before last, I was in a hotel with no heating in my room, and no heating in the hotel and not hot water. So it was really rather cold. So is that enough on energy transition? We're looking for renewable energy to be trebled by 2030. And this is going to be a huge investment. And as Georgiana has already mentioned, there's going to be a lot of so-called green bottlenecks in the supply chain and in plenty of other places. So I hope that's a suitable introduction to what's going on, and we can probably see all this around us. Georgiana.
Thank you, Michael. Trung, would you please tell us a little bit on the COP28? You're still on mute.
Hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Trung. We talk about COP28. I must come back. I'm on this topic of course and also energy transition. I used to be a engineer for the thermal power plant where we are doing the oil-fired, gas-fired, and coal-fired power plants. But I have a chance to attend COP23 in Bonn, and we understand more about the needs to Paris Agreement and on the chain of the industry that the energy power sector have to move forward. And now I would like to summarize something that interests for the parties when we continue with the dispute resolution later on. In COP 28, in item 28, they are further recognize the needs for deep, rapid, and certain reduction of the greenhouse gas emission in line with the 1.5 degrees pathway. And among that, there is some pathway and approach like, first one is tripling the renewable energy capacity globally by 2030, and also doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvement. That is first point. The second one is doing the accelerating effort toward the phase down of unbudgeted coal power. Third one is there is a select effort toward the net zero emission energy system. There are, of course, there are also the item E that I want to mention is on the new technology for renewables, nuclear abatement, and removal technology, such as carbon capture and utilization. That is some point that I would like to point from the conclusion of COP28 that can be provide the basis for our further discussion. you know that in some the IRENA World Energy Transition Outlook Review in 2023, they says on the global investment in energy transition, already 1.3 trillion US dollar in 2022. However, that yearly investment must more than quadruple to over 5 trillion US dollar to meet with 1.5 degree pathway. And to make that, by 2030, the cumulative investment must around 44 trillion, which means that we must have 35 trillion US dollar must be spent for the efficiency, electrification, grid expansion, and flexibility for this coming year. So the huge amount of investment we are waiting to spend, and whether what happened by them, what we see from our experience in my country is then there must be a green bottleneck when deadline coming, and then the huge investment is going out, and also a lot of dispute before and especially after such bottleneck will be happen. Yes, that's why I contribute some point from what I learned for COP28. Yes, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Trung, for that. Well, so we have the money, we make the investment, we start implementing the projects, and of course, here we go. Dispute starts to appear. So I would like to ask Michael here about how are we supposed to deal with those disputes that arise from all these transition projects?
Thank you, Georgiana. Well, I suppose the first observation I was going to make was maybe to take one step backwards and look at what we're trying to achieve here. Obviously, to facilitate the transition to net zero, if that's really what we want to do, or at least to improve our, if you like, environmental approach to energy generation, and also all other activities. It's not just about generating energy. But in looking to avoid and indeed resolve disputes, we're not just trying to use DAABs or any arbitration under the Energy Charter Treaty, or indeed investor-state arbitration as a method of lining the pockets of fossil fuel investors or contractors or whatever. What we're trying to do, in my view anyway, is to increase investor confidence so that in the case of contractors, they're prepared to quote more keenly and maybe take on more risk and make the whole process more efficient, because there's going to be hopefully less disputes, and if there are disputes or differences, then they're more easily resolved. And I think that that's something that is terribly important at the moment. For example, in the Netherlands, we're seeing there's a big claim about the dismantling, or rather no longer being used, the largest natural gas field in Europe, which I think has been, there may have been some fracking involved, and this is being pictured as fossil fuel, lining the pockets of fossil fuel investors. But obviously, whatever dispute resolution provision was put in there was designed to make sure that investors went into this project with confidence and didn't risk having their assets effectively or their project taken away without appropriate compensation. So I think that's quite an important thing to remember. When we discussed before we came on air, as it were, I thought I might mention a couple of real things that are going on. One of which we don't know whether there's a dispute, but we know something has been going on. I live on the Isle of Wight, south of England. as its name suggests, it's an island. It's separated by a stretch of water called the Solent from the mainland, or England, as we call it, or the North Island even. And when we've been going backwards on the ferry, there's been a cable repair ship, big orange Belgian ship, stationed there, maybe for a couple of weeks. And the story goes that there's a 4-cable interconnector to northern France, which we buy. At the moment, we mostly buy power from the French, actually. So one of those cables has been out of action. That ship apparently has been trying to repair it. But we don't know what the outcome is. The ship in the meantime has gone back to Belgium because we can track her. So somewhere in there lies a dispute. It must do, because there is 25% of the interconnector, whether or not it's being used, was out of action. So that's something we're going to see, I think, more and more of. You can imagine there's a contractual dispute perhaps arising out of that. There may be further a claim against somebody who parked a big ship and dragged an anchor over one of the cables, perhaps even a fishing boat, although they're probably not big enough to do that kind of damage. But that's the kind of thing we're going to see more and more. And in terms of green bottlenecks, I was talking to one of my colleagues earlier on, and we don't really have a fleet of these kind of repair ships. So there's a green bottleneck for us. And also, if you look at, there's a worldwide shortage of ships to install the huge wind turbines. Where I live in the Isle of Wight, Vestas are there, and they're producing these enormous wind turbines, which they then take over to the mainland to be shipped onwards. So that's the kind of thing that's going to arise. And then if we look on a more positive note, there were some announcements recently about this giant interconnector project, 4 cables. I can't remember how many gigawatts, but it's a lot, maybe 10. So that's 4 2.5 gigawatt cables from Morocco, where they're installing huge solar power arrays, batteries, and wind turbines, and then they're going to run 2,500 kilometers, I think it is. So it's 10,000 kilometers of cable to North Devon, where it be brought ashore. That we're going to build the biggest cable laying ship in the world, which I've just learned, will carry 17,000 tons of cable at a time. There's going to be a huge battery complex somewhere to store this energy so it can be released. And what we can imagine the kind of things which might come along where you're going to have conflicts with, no doubt, the fishing fleets in the Bay of Biscay and in the Channel and all sorts. So it's important that these kind of disputes are both avoided, and if they can't be avoided, that they're resolved. So I hope that's enough for that, answering that. I mean, this is, I suppose what I'm saying is, obviously, as Trung has emphasized, this is really important. More people need to be talking about it. And there's going to be real world problems of the kinds, real problems and perhaps opportunities of the kind I've just mentioned.
Indeed. Thank you, Michael. And if you look at it, you just mentioned Morocco, you've spoken about European countries. So a lot of states are going to be involved in it. And another way to look at it perhaps would be the fact that with the war going on up north, Ukraine, Russia, it affects quite strongly the energy market in Europe. And to some point, there are a lot of discussions about, shall we stop implementing these energy transition projects after all the investments have been poured into it, and focus on immediate fossil energy or nuclear plants that could also impact negatively on the environment if not done in the proper way. So a lot of potential disputes have arisen from these approaches, and some states have focused more on traditional energy methods rather than on the renewable sources. And this created a certain discontent, but also a lot of contractual problems given the lack of availability of funds for it. So Trung, can you tell us a little bit more about these investor-state disputes and these trends for investors to use more of investor-state arbitration?
Yes, Jumana. Georgina, I want to mention, yeah, regarding the state disputes in last year about the same time, we organized and learned from Spain. The team from the Ministry of Justice of Spain have won just Monday arbitration team of the month because they won a lot of investor state disputes or regarding energy, renewable energy project. And why? One of the reasons due to the change of the policy of the government in Spain on renewable energy project. And for some time, the arbitration team of the Ministry of Justice of Spain have to deal with 70 at the same time. We invite the investor and they say a lot of experience about us one. From my country experience, we also face some kind of investor state dispute and arbitration. For example, one coal-fired power project were listed in the major power plant, and later on, it was removed from the national plan. And the investor with the dual citizenship have filed a claim against the government based on the investors' state dispute on the side between Vietnam and the United States. So with the chance by the government to move far away from coal, but it can cause some disputes coming on the investor state. Yes, and that is. Can I continue with the other type of disputes? Okay. Not only from investor and state dispute, also when with the target of COP28, we need to triple renewable energy capacity, but they also future potential dispute when every party want to spend money on the renewable energy, and sometimes there is huge lack of the equipment of the supply and in the markets. And after the project pass the bottleneck, then if some disputes, some project cannot meet the deadline, then there a huge dispute between the employer and the contractor, between the contractor and the subcontractor, between the employer, the investor, and the bank. I myself and also other team, we have a DAB for a renewable project, wind project, where the only when the project failed to meet the deadline for feed-in tariff, then so much disputes happen to the project, and especially only then the ad hoc DAB had to be called. Yeah, that is from contractual dispute. Also, regarding the power purchase agreement, for some project already agree with the term for example, 20, 30 years, for example, but when it is changed and we need to move toward renewable or other low emission technology, such kind of thing can cause the change in the government change the price for the such project, then also can cause the dispute. And especially for the BOT or the PPP project with the existing coal-fired or gas-fired or oil-fired power plant, such project, when we want to phase out or change the fossil fuel, it will potentially the dispute coming between the party and also between the government and the investor. And also, when we talk about the point E of the COP28 is changing with the new technology, like offshore, like hydrogen, on the carbon capture and storage facility. You know that this is the new technology. So current standard contract, current dispute resolution, and also insurance and frames enough well prepared for such kind of technology to cover the risk, the potential risk, and also related factor that can cause more, how to say, more dispute coming out for the new engineering approach. That is some point I can contribute for this one.
Okay, that was quite a lot of information on these new projects. But to boil it down, at the end of the day, everything is, just a dispute. Michael, would there be any difference between this type of in this industry's specifics and other construction infrastructure industries disputes? Is what makes them different, or why do we need to look at them differently, or is anything specific that needs a special attention in relation to this type of disputes?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I think that the kind of disputes which are going to arise will involve, obviously, contract and public procurement issues. I've been involved actually as a mediator in a nuclear decommissioning thing in the UK, where it was a procurement dispute, but that was about decommissioning, existing nuclear capacity. So, okay, so the area might, the actual sector might be slightly new and slightly different, but actually it's a well-trodden route, whether you do public procurement properly or not. So I think the answer is that we have to look at new technology. There will be new forms of contract. There will things probably that people haven't looked at before. So it's really a matter of having some specialized sector knowledge, I think. Otherwise, the disputes and the way that you try and avoid them, which I guess we'll come on to in a minute, and the way you try and resolve them, are not going to be radically different. I mean, if you look at the Energy Charter Treaty, for example, that was an attempt to standardize contracts for energy transmission, and also to have a setup for dispute resolution by arbitration. But people are now pulling out of it because they see it, certainly in a European context, as a kind of way of, as I've said, compensating fossil fuel investors unfairly. And even the UK, which rarely takes much notice of any kind of alternative dispute resolution, should we say, is talking about pulling out. So I guess the answer to that is, are the disputes going to be different? No, in concept, but the technologies will be new. If you take carbon capture, for example, if you take these huge interconnector projects, I mean, I think we're working on an interconnector between the UK and Iceland, and we already have one or more to Norway, and I think a couple to France. But the length of these projects, the people and communities affected, the risks involved are going to be maybe they're going to be just much bigger than perhaps we've come across so far. True, and I think you have meant. Then we've got the known unknowns, which are, and that's putting pressure on more developing economies, should we say, because they're worried about energy security, as I guess everybody is.
practically we're saying that the hard skills set of the dispute resolvers and those attempting to avoid disputes will have to change, where the soft set skills are not necessarily different. So shall we look a little bit more on the avoidance of these disputes? What methods can we use, or how should we include avoidance and resolution methods in these new contracts, dealing with new types of engineering technologies and things? Michael?
Okay, thank you. Well, I think you very rightly mentioned soft skills here, and I guess in major projects, there's certainly in this country, there's an awful lot of talk about collaboration, collaborative work, methods of working. How collaborative it actually is in practice, one never quite knows. You know, obviously, we're talking from the standpoint of the Dispute Resolution Board Foundation. So dispute boards or DAABs or whatever we call them. I say it doesn't really matter what you call it, what you want. We all know what it is. It's like an elephant, difficult to describe perhaps, but easy to recognize when one sees what's on. So I think the use of standing boards, whether they're to adjudicate or to be advisory, it is a very good thing. I think the problem we have there is that they're seen as expensive probably by people who've never used them, and also probably by people who benefit from the rather perhaps cosy procurement and contract management things that go on at the moment. Certainly I've heard that in the UK context from somebody who really does know what they're talking about. Oh, well, the engineers can always sort it out. Well, the trouble is, the engineers, the lawyers, the QSs, whoever, they can't always sort it out. Sometimes they need some outside and independent help. And I think looking towards these techniques on the even softer side, perhaps bringing in neutrals to facilitate even negotiations at the contract formation stage, and a more kind of conciliation or mediation approach is another way of looking at it. This is so huge and so important that I would guess that all these techniques should be looked at.
Indeed. Trang, do you want to add something to this? You're thinking.
Yes, I want to contribute one point is the things, the party, when I met the party in the renewable energy, in renewable project, what I learned is more the mindset is still looking to, for dispute resolution is going to the cost or to the arbitration, the long time with the courts, litigation, or with more expensive arbitration. But very few people learn about the dispute board. Only someone who already had the experience with FIDI contract can know what either DB or DAB is. But for the other, especially for those who use the ad hoc contract, the bespoke contract, or other type of contract, they are not familiar or don't know about DAB. Even when they sign out their contract, use FIDI contract, when it comes to dispute boss, some lawyer or the party just replace dispute boss, DAB, or with arbitration. And then when the thing happen, they cannot meet, how to say, deadline for fit in tariff to get the price. And a lot of trouble and disputes and between the party, contractor, employer, subcontractor, and other one. Without the necessary support from the dispute board, it causes a lot of trouble to the party. Because I also involved of support for some project that they have to go to arbitration and see the huge obstacle ahead for the party to go in, both parties to go in with the such arbitration issue that should have done more properly with the support from the dispute board, especially if they already set up it from the beginning of the project. That's my 2 cents.
So you're practically saying that avoidance, with the help of a dispute board, would have made more sense than arbitration. So avoidance is more important than resolution. So perhaps then you're right talking about FIDI contracts in your part of the world, our part of the world here as well. But looking at UK has 2 or 3 types of standard contracts using a variety of dispute boards, whether adjudication or like the JCT last year introduced, a couple of years ago, sorry, introduced the dispute boards as well. But there are also other, I understood Singapore has an statutory adjudication provision introduced in the contracts, and other parts of the world that have started to use more and more a variety, as Michael said, whatever you call them, at the end of the day, they're dispute boards. So you have the life proof that resolution is not only expensive, but also, you know, a little bit late in the process and would have been better off using the avoidance. So how could we, or what shall we do to make the avoidance methods and ways of techniques known, and how could we implement that in real life? Who would like to talk about it? Michael?
So I go, Georgiana? Yeah, okay, it's probably my turn. I think there's a huge education job to be done. I've personally been involved with some of my colleagues, including John Wright, I think, who's on the call, in running courses where we're really, rather than telling people how to do their job as a DAAB member, we're actually trying to help potential users understand the value of these processes. And of course, you know, in fact, you and I, at least, I don't know whether Trung's going to be there, Georgiana and Anne will be in Sofia in about a month's time, or just under now. And the first day is going to be very much focused, 14th, 15th of March, is going to be very much focused on the user rather than the dispute board member, although it'll be of interest to everybody, hopefully. So I think there's a huge education job. I think part of that education job is to, in this sector, is to facilitate the transition to clean energy, but encourage mediation, encourage investment in building trust. And you know, I'm sure we've all encountered projects where the contractor, probably is usually the contractor, has because they think they've taken on probably too much risk. They quote a very competitive price and they need the work. Maybe that's because of the cycle, the economic cycle in that business or that country, and they end up trying to put through an awful lot of variations, and they see that as perhaps the only way to make money out of the project. Well, that's really not that's a kind of recipe for that manufactures claims and disputes of itself. So heading off all this by having, you know, a combination of soft skills, perhaps backed up by hard skills in terms of adjudication. But I think the evidence in the States, where it's more dispute review boards, not that I'm that familiar with that market, is that when a DRB makes a recommendation, that people generally tend to observe it. But that's probably because they're used to doing it, and that's the culture on major projects. But I think it's education with a big E, and that's what's really important. We have to disabuse people of thinking that arbitration is some kind of secret court conducted in smoke-filled rooms by people loaded up with conflicts of interest. They do arise. We all know that, and we've all seen that. But we also all know that ultimately arbitration, which is where this ends up if there's no other way, is very much across borders. So there's the answer trial model arbitration set up, which has been implemented in many countries. Not Indonesia, interestingly enough, very important, very large, huge country. I was reading the other day. So even in places, you know, I say I don't wish to be rude about Iran, but you know, there's plenty of countries that where you wouldn't expect it that have the UNCITRAL model law, and also will have signed up to the New York Convention. So whilst it is private, it is by no means completely confidential. And of course, ICSID decisions, the ones that are largely complained about, are all published, and they're of course appealable by another tribunal. So but probably it's a matter of education, but also some promotion with a capital P, because this rather arcane world, which I've been fortunate enough to get into almost as a matter of serendipity, there's an awful lot more going on than perhaps one just reads in the newspapers or in the media.
Sure. So, thank you for that. But let's give a positive point this time to Indonesia. Indonesia has passed back in 2017 a law for dispute boards. They are implementing dispute boards in their public projects and their private projects. And perhaps next time we'll allow Dr. Sarwono to join us. He's the promoter of the law and one of the big promoters of dispute boards in the whole Asia region.
Actually, just if I may interject very quickly, I think what is fascinating is that in many ways, countries like Indonesia, Nigeria, and so on are miles ahead of some of what we might call the Western democracies, including the UK on this. And it is astonishing, and I've been going on about this many times on LinkedIn and elsewhere, most recently only the other day. It is astonishing that with the pressure on public spending in many countries, particularly in the UK, but not exclusively, that some of these techniques or concepts or processes are at least not piloted to see whether they work and might make public procurement more effective. I happen to be an interest in railways, a bit of a train spotter. There we are, we're a bit weird. But if you look at the cost of building a high-speed railway in the UK and compare it to, say, France or Germany, it is astronomically higher in the UK. And it's not our job today to go into reasons for this, but it may well be that the absence of the use of these processes we're talking about may lead to increased ultimate expense.
Sure. Well, thank you, Michael. Trung, I would like to ask you to tell us a few words about the project you're involved in terms of dispute board, and how, if you've managed to actually implement dispute avoidance, and how did you feel that the whole process was accepted. And then I would like, if possible, Michael, to actually go a little bit back into the energy transition projects, and if you could think about and summarize for us the pinch points for where these disputes are likely to arise, that will be great. Trung?
Yes, thanks, Rosana. Yes, come back to my country, Vietnam. For the project that I involved, at the chair of the DAB, in fact, it's the employer come from a country which already is familiar with this billboard. The contractor is local here, and so both parties agree to use the DAB. Normally, employer in the country, local one, are reluctant on the position. We are civil law country, and in our civil procedure code and in construction law, Right now, for project dispute, they can only be litigation, arbitration, mediation, or mutual settlement. So many party, and especially the lawyer, point out that no, please not your DAB, because if the DAB issue decision, then you have to go to arbitration, and maybe arbitrators can decide again the decision of the DAB. The other ones say no, DAB is not in Vietnam law, so please not use it. So what I learned from Indonesia case is they also civil law country, but they already put this billboard into their constitution law. That is really interesting. And in the coming in July this year, when Indonesia organized the event, we also want to invite our people from the government side to visit and learn how a civil law like Indonesia can adapt and use this billboard and can learn to make the changing of our constitution law in Vietnam right now. For our case, many parties, for example, in some railroad project, I was invited to give the quote, but later on they answer, sorry, with current salary how to say sailing of the country, we cannot pay you as per the normal practice in for DB because it's too high. We only can invite foreigner, not local. Local is set up by the sailing. For foreigner, we don't have sailing, we can invite them. That is the true facts happen here in our country. So it will not support the development of DB and application of DB in the country. Yet there's some story. Thank you.
Okay, then that's quite interesting and a little bit hopefully the situation will be solved in the future. Michael, if you please.
Thank you. Well, I think, I think we should be optimistic and positive about all this because we do have a range of processes and solutions to deal with dispute avoidance in this perhaps relatively new sector. And I think that's probably something to say to set an optimistic tone. There's still a huge education job to be done. And I often quote Shakespeare in Henry IV, Part 1, where Prince Hal says about Falstaff, wisdom cries out in the wilderness and no man regards it. And there's a bit of that going on. Actually, in the context of what Shakespeare wrote, it was heavily sarcastic, but never mind. For those of you who know the play, you'll know what I mean. But I think there is a lot of wisdom and we need to make sure that it's heard. If we look at the areas where disputes are going to arise, I mean, if we, as I've mentioned, if we go back to I suppose what might broadly call decommissioning before you even start a new project, there's going to be disputes, as we have seen with the decommissioning of I think it's Shell and ExxonMobil bought an arbitration against the Netherlands. I don't know whether it's investor state, I guess, anyway, about the closure of the largest natural gas field in Europe. I mentioned disputes about nuclear decommissioning, and then there's just kind of disputes in the energy sector about the seizure of assets. So a Finnish energy company has apparently brought a claim against Russia about the seizure of its operations in Russia. So before we even start a new project, we're going to have disputes on existing projects, and it's difficult to see how they can be avoided as part of the contractual process. But on the other hand, on the other hand, everything in life is about timing and communication, and going to litigation or arbitration is not a great way of improving relationships or preserving them, which actually may be necessary because perhaps people want to do business in the future. So that's the kind of, if you like, the back end of it. And then we go into new projects. So we've got carbon capture technology. We've got new technologies which may or may not work. We've got supply chain issues. We've already touched on some of those. And then there's the kind of usual contractual disputes with perhaps contractors taking on too much risk that they don't necessarily properly understand. And perhaps there should be more use of the techniques, dispute avoidance techniques that we've been talking about. And perhaps dispute boards or DABs themselves, particularly if you're looking at a FIDIC contract or whatever, should actually be more proactive in promoting dispute avoidance, because at various stages it's written into the contracts and there's no reason why they shouldn't do it at any time. And in fact, my own initial interest in DAABs, or DABs as they then were, was when the ICC launched their original DB rules, and I suddenly thought, oh, well, there's combination of mediation and adjudication and arbitration. That's something I might know about. So then I suppose if there's going to be supply chain issues, which is going to be so-called green bottlenecks, we're going to encounter shortage of experts and consultants who may be able to actually advise on these projects from their inception, to advise what got wrong when it comes to disputes. I think Nick Rigby's on the call. So if you're there, Nick, greetings, including from our mutual friend, Mike Brooks. So Nick knows an awful lot about these kind of things and may have something to contribute in the chat box. So there we are.
That'll be great. Thank you. There is a question in the Q&A, but before answering and giving you some time to give it a thought about it, I would like to invite Nick Rigby to come online. Nick Rigby is the co-chair of the DRBF Offshore Wind Task Force. And in that capacity, he has been in the last 2 or 3 years dealing a lot with these energy transition projects from the offshore wind perspective. And he could share with us a different way of looking at, or a first-hand experience as well on the project. And can we bring him on, please? Just a second. I'm not sure how to do this. Okay, you're on mute, Nick.
Right, I'm unmuted. Can you
Brilliant.
hear me?
Yes.
Great, good, okay. Yes, thanks very much. And as you say, Georgiana, I've been in this space for some considerable time, dealing particularly with offshore wind and a number of other, let's say, related sectors such as onshore wind and also advanced conversion technology. And I think there are several drivers behind. Let's specifically talk about offshore wind and then spin it out into other areas. A couple of aspects of offshore wind and I guess renewables in general is that it's in terms of the number of people, it's relatively small, and we all know each other because there've been a number of companies who've been leaders in this field, and everybody's sort of done a spell with one of them. So that means that there's there's a healthy arrangements are in place in terms of let's say parties consistently contracting with the same parties, and secondly we know each other. So that means there's a strong motivation to resolve things without having to get into a dispute mechanism. So that's on the positive side. On the negative side, offshore wind in particular has to be done now with a multi-contract arrangement. Nobody will offer a single EPC wrap in the offshore wind market, with one or two exceptions. And what that means is that if something goes wrong with one of the contractors, the knock-on impact on other contractors and on the project itself is very significant. So disputes, when they occur, can be very costly. But as I say, the good news is that they're fairly good at resorting them. And I guess that also reflects the fact that, for example, onshore wind has a very small number of disputes compared with offshore wind. And the other field in this area where we've seen a lot of disputes is around advanced conversion technology. This is the use of a basically a chamber where you reduce the amount of oxygen content and you break down the material, which is typically waste, into a gas that you can burn in a conventional combined cycle arrangement. And this area has seen a lot of disputes, particularly in the UK, but that's largely been to do with the fact that the technology is quite challenging. And secondly, there have been sort of, let's say, fits and starts where there's been a degree of over enthusiasm for this technology, which resulted in a lot of people building plants and then finding they couldn't make them work. So that, oh, and then just a quick word on solar. Solar, like wind, has the benefit of it's almost like Lego. You're sort of putting together a series of fairly standard pieces, and therefore it's fairly straightforward to manage those projects. And they also have been not been subject to as many disputes as I say, particularly offshore wind, which has seen some horrendous disputes and a number of particular issues. So hopefully that's useful.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, it is. And you practically helped us divide the answer to our question. Our question is asked by Marina: what is the dispute resolution success rate on this energy transition project compared to the common ones? Well, Nick has been walking you through, and with what you've already heard from Michael and Trong, we have practically the common, let's call them this way, those disputes born from contractual matters or joint venture matters, from construction-related disputes and investor state disputes. And then you have the unknown, the big unknown, those energy transition projects, ones related to technology, as you heard again, Nick and Michael telling you about it, and weather-related, weather different from the usual weather that we talk about as unforeseen conditions in general. So I would like to ask first Michael if he thinks there is a bigger success rate, and let's look at the weather and technology versus the side of the other three that we've mentioned in so far, or if you have a different approach in answering this question. Michael?
I don't know is the honest answer, but just to bear out what Nick said, you know, a side he hadn't mentioned is batteries. So there's going to be, I think, a part of the Morocco Devon interconnector, there's going to be a massive battery farm somewhere. I think they're setting up a separate battery plant to build these batteries. Now, of course, these batteries have an unfortunate habit of catching fire. And unfortunately, if they do catch fire, you can't put them out. I was at a seminar in Bristol the other day where they were talking about a battery plant, not a huge one, which caught fire, and basically they couldn't, well, they had to let it burn for 36 hours before it petered out. So that's another aspect of that we haven't yet we haven't yet mentioned, and increased risk. But as far as I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. I think that the whole process, if you like, of people, as Nick has mentioned, is all about relationships and communication. It's better if people like each other and get on, and then you can have a kind of gradual escalation of informal assistance by whatever body it's going to be, or recommendations possible, and then possibly DAAB decisions, stroke adjudications, and ultimately arbitrations. So there's there's a kind of gradual lead into something from what you described rightly, Georgiana, as soft skills into probably hard skills.
Thank you, Michael. I forgot to add the regulatory disputes to the new energy transition ones. That will be again a big field. And if you just said about batteries, well, that will be, you know, letting them burn out. There will be a pollution factor. So
Yeah,
the clean, you know, the fines and all the aspects that come with it, I guess will be quite quite.
I was, when I was in Dubai the other day, well, earlier in the year or last year, there was an enormous rainstorm, so we were driven to the airport by a wonderful taxi driver, but we were in an electric car, which would, of course, have lots of lithium batteries in the bottom of it. And we drove, I'll tell you how deep it was. We drove past a taxi that was floating. And I thought afterwards, I didn't say anything to my partner. Well, there was we were sitting on a lot of lithium batteries. I hope they were all sealed up. So, but then if you look at the problems with lithium, you know, where does it come from? It comes Democratic Republic of the Congo and elsewhere, maybe even Cornwall in the future in the UK. So all this stuff is a very delicate balance.
True. Do you want to say anything? Do you think there is going to be a different resolution success rate, or just the usual disputes? Because the number of disputes in energy project is on the rise. That's definitely, and I think it's proportional with the amount of investment that goes on with them.
Also similar to Michael, I cannot answer the value, but from the case that we involved, we found out that the parties at the end they settle based on the not exact at the decision, but based on the decisions to get the amicable settlement and solve the issue, and also it provide the roadmap for some other project. If some party discuss with me, but they just say sorry that their dispute resolution clause just pointed to arbitration in Singapore or somewhere else, and to solve the problem they have now, to do a lot of preparation work like expert reports, and also spend huge volume of money. Yeah, they already in the trouble, but now have to spend more for the arbitration work in the coming month. So from that point of view, we understand that party already learned about the case and looking to see what is the change in the future when they write down the dispute resolution clause. Yeah, that's all from me. I saw one hand going up.
Thank you for that. Well, I see that Mr. Hambali is online, and he's from Indonesia, where we just said there is a dispute board law. We wanted to ask you, do you know or you have any experience in terms of any dispute boards being used in power projects? Can we bring you on? And can we bring Mr. Hambali on? Thank you. Hello.
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 Hello. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you, Miss Georgiana and Mr. Trung and Mr. Copper. We have a dispute in project power project, especially about price adjustment. Many projects in Indonesia, because COVID and maybe because the time, so many problem is about a price adjustment. What do you think about that to solve the case about price adjustment? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, I think that helps us to conclude the day. I'll just want to remind you that our next webinar on the topic is
Sorry, George. One hand by Marina Mapua.
Oh, okay.
By hands.
Sorry, I haven't seen that. Sorry. Marina? Which question? Can you see it? Because I don't see it. Sorry.
I think it might have been dealt with earlier, actually.
Yeah, that was the one asking about the success rate, right?
That's right. I think so.
Okay. I wanted to tell you all about the next webinar, which is going to be about climate changes, disputes, and green dispute boards. And there will be a couple of more webinars from our offshore task force group. Please follow the event calendar on the DRBF website and hopefully see as many as possible of you in the next couple of weeks in Sofia. As Michael said, we will be discussing on the first day topics from the perspective of the users, especially for the first-time users or those viewers who had a negative experience as their first experience with dispute board because of the lack of knowledge about it. So going back to education, as Michael put it. And I think from our perspective, that's the main day of the conference. But also for those of you who are dispute board practitioners, there is an interesting surprise for the day too. And I think you would love it. So looking forward to see as many of you as possible on the 13th, 14th of March and 15th of March in Sofia. And if you cannot make it, please follow us on the DRBF event calendar for other webinars on the sustainability series or even the connection series from the user's perspective or from the practitioner's perspective. Thank you very much indeed to all of you today, and in particular to Michael Cover and Trung Nguyen Nam, and see you next time.
Thank you, Ms. Georgiana. Thank you.